Hello, my name is E-Soup, or sorry, my name is Ezra, otherwise known as E-Soup. Um, and today we're reading more case file, and as always, I'm so excited to get back into it. Hi, Psykeen, I'm glad you could make it. Um, I I have had a weekend. I have a trip for family stuff that I have to go on soon. And it's like I booked a flight, but it's totally up in the air of if I have to change the flight. And I've been like dealing with all that stuff and like coordinating and everything. So like I apologize today if I'm all over the place. I'm trying to um center myself with the meat bun, which might not be a good way of doing it, but we'll see if that works. Um Today we're reading chapters 65 through 68. Um, so yeah, please look in the description for the trigger warnings if you think you need that, and please give the stream a like. Hi Nina, hi Henry. Good to see you all here. Um, so oh Psyche, you're on vacation this week. Ooh, traveling. I normally like traveling. And I think once I actually get there, I'm not gonna mind this trip terribly. But I'm like it's not like a fun thing, but like I like being in another place, but it's the like coordinating before you get there that I'm like, I don't want to have to deal with that. Oh, you have to fly back home too, Nina? Are we all taking flights coming up? Um, so we were where the heck were we? We were on page 107 for chapter 65, which is called "And Was Very Easy to Anger." And that one is sort of connected with the last chapter title, but he felt very hot. And well, we all know what happened last time, so I completely understand Xie Ching being very easy to anger. Um, I feel like something I noticed is like how incredibly stoic he is to the point that like he hasn't been very affected by the like SA that he's experienced, but I can't tell if he's just like that stoic or if he's like bottling everything up and he's going to completely explode. Um I kind of feel like he needs to do that a little bit. Um so yeah, let's see what happens. This time, the idea had struck He Yu on the spot. He had been truly, miserably starving, so he tormented Xie Qingcheng until he couldn't take it anymore. After eating his fill again, he helped Xie Qingcheng into his clothes, then hugged him and nuzzled against him for a while, kissing him again and again until the fire within him once again began to stir. All right, Mr. I'm straight. If not for an interruption via phone call from the school, asking him where he was and informing him that the award ceremony following the film's showing was about to begin, there was a 10,000% chance he would have gone for another round. Afterward, Xie Qingcheng was in an incredible amount of pain. The same feeling from more than 10 days ago, a kind of dull ache that he couldn't put into words, pressed deep into his body once again like a brand. But this time, the queasy feeling in his body was even harder to bear. Last time, He Yu had at least taken protective measures, so there hadn't been any bone-deep discomfort after the fact. Xie Qingcheng only had to deal with the pain. It was nothing like now, when this feeling made even the act of walking drain his face of all color. As Xie Qingcheng sat back in his seat, Chen Man let out a sigh. Guh, where'd you go? What took you so long? You were gone for nearly an hour. I almost went to look for you. I would have gone to look for a person much sooner than like an hour of being away under the circumstance. Xie Qingcheng sat completely rigid, his back straight and tense. He refused to relax even slightly, much less allow Chen Man to see any of his discomfort. But he didn't want to say anything. His mind was on the verge of collapsing from the frenzied and illicit things the two of them had just done, completely heedless of consequences. It's fine, said Xie Qingcheng. After a moment's silence, he added apathetically, just keep watching the movie. Chen Man nodded, but as his gaze swept over Xie Qingcheng's collar, he paused and raised his hand. What are you doing? Xie Qingcheng saw everyone as an enemy right now. Even though he didn't believe what He Yu had said about Chen Man being gay, he still instinctively grabbed Chen Man's wrist. The strength of his grip was enough to frighten Chen Man. Guh, there's a strand of hair on your collar. Xie Qingcheng picked it off himself without saying a word. That strand of hair was slightly longer than his own. Of course he knew whose it was. Suppressing the furious trembling of his fingertips, he tossed the hair away with a cold expression. Do you have a towelette? Chen Man did have one, so he dug it out and handed it to Xie Qingcheng. Xie Qingcheng wiped his fingers clean one by one, like they had been contaminated by some virus that would cause his entire body to rot if it remained on his skin for too long. Holding back his intense disgust and revulsion, he set the used towelette aside and closed his eyes. The movie was already almost over. Less than 5 minutes after Xie Qingcheng had returned to his seat, the end credits began to roll. But the event wasn't over yet. Next came the awards ceremony. By the second half of the semester, Huzhou University's various student rankings had already come out. And so, at the end of this kind of major performance, there would usually be an award ceremony. In addition to awards for producing the campus film, the names of the new student government chairs, scholarship winners, and top 10 outstanding students would all be announced tonight. Henry, not the rankings. Is it... the rankings again. Naturally, the students who would be winning these awards had been informed by their teachers in advance. The newly selected member of the student government's publicity committee is... As the names were read aloud one by one, each of the students walked onto the stage to accept their awards to the sound of the audience's applause. The new chairman of the student government, as selected by the school board, is He Yu from the screenwriting and directing class 1001. He Yu, please step up to the stage to receive your award from the university president. The new chairman of the student government. That's interesting, because I'm like, does He Yu even care about that sort of thing at all? Xie Qingcheng looked on blankly as the beast that had just ravaged him in the dressing room walked onto the stage. As required, he had changed backstage into Huzhou University's student uniform of a white dress shirt and loose slacks, and he looked dapper and refined as he shook the hand of the university president with a smile. Foolish, love-struck girls and even some starry-eyed boys applauded loudly from the audience, craning their necks to get a better look at the distinguished face of the scholarly and altogether exemplary young Master He. Our He Yu is a paragon of virtue and learning, modest and reserved. I hope that as the new chairman of the student government, he will serve as an even more outstanding model for all of our students and dedicate himself even more fully to our university. The president pinned the Student Association chairman's badge onto the chest of He Yu's uniform. Because He Yu was very tall and the president was a slightly stooped old man, He Yu bent down slightly, a picture of consideration and modesty. After the president finished conferring his award, He Yu smiled and leaned forward in a slight bow, the long curve of his eyelashes making his expression seem exceedingly gentle. He's so cute. Such a gentleman. He's well-mannered, too. Fury blazed from Xie Qingchung's chest to the rims of his eyes. He was a gentleman? Well-mannered? Cute? Then who was that in the dressing room just now? Was this the same person? On stage, He Yu was still being lavish with assorted commendations from the school council. They said he was modest and courteous, and with high standards of moral integrity, as he accepted trophy after trophy. Xie Qingcheng was the only one who knew that less than 15 minutes before stepping on stage to receive all these awards, this smiling and refined young Xue Ba, at the center of the crowd's attention, had been entangled backstage with a man 13 years his senior. The same mouth that had kissed Xie Qingcheng so fiercely and deeply was speaking such dignified words up on the stage right now, his voice gentle and elegant, winning round after round of applause. But what had that mouth been saying 15 minutes ago? He had been pressing kisses all over Xie Qingcheng's ear, pouring all sorts of unbearably shameful and corny sentiments into it. Coming out of his mouth, those flirtatious words became coarse and filthy. Xie Qingcheng could still feel the lingering sensation. Even the slightest movement aroused such torment from that hot stickiness that it made all the hairs on his body stand on end. It was so awful that he wanted to die. Meanwhile, the culprit who had reduced him to this state was taking the microphone on stage and calmly beginning to deliver his speech, dressed in the most proper and serious of uniforms, with a badge signifying the school's highest approval pinned to his chest, the very picture of handsome refinement. Xie Qingcheng looked at him with a grim expression. Gradually, his eyes glazed over as he thought back to their conversation in the dressing room. This time, he really had acquiesced to He Yu. But in the end, the reason for his compromise wasn't the photo itself. Rather, based on that photo, he had simply made the diagnosis that He Yu was both too ill and too difficult to deal with. He had imprinted on him in a completely abnormal way, like a baby bird. Xie Qingcheng had a very clear understanding of his purpose in life. He needed to focus his energy on completing the mission that was hidden in his heart. There was no way any person or object could block his path. On that private, secret road, he would cut down anything he encountered, demon or deity. Other than death, no obstacle could stop him. The kind of desire that He Yu had for him was just another stumbling block. A very troublesome one. So he would rather say yes to He Yu, dealing with him casually and perfunctorily, by agreeing to continue this kind of relationship with him, even if he himself didn't have a modicum of interest. At least that way, He Yu wouldn't waste any more of his time. Interesting. That's I mean, one, it feels like a terrible decision, but I can't blame Xie Qingcheng. But it's also interesting because I've been thinking about this. In this series, like, at what point is Xie Qingcheng going to actually return the feelings for He Yu? Like, I feel like it could take a really long time. And the main thing I'm curious about is, like, what on earth needs to happen for that to even be possible? Because it's not it's not happening right now. Before, when Chen Man had realized that Xie Qingcheng was a frightening person, he was actually quite right. Xie Qingcheng was truly terrifying. Chen Man had thought that he didn't fear death, that he seemed willing to die at any time. But what Chen Man hadn't realized was even more terrifying. Xie Qingcheng didn't see himself as a person at all. It wasn't only Chen Man. Even Xie Shui and Auntie Li had yet to discover that Xie Qingcheng only saw himself as a machine, a blade, a shield, a scabbard, as a bargaining chip that could be invested, as an offering that could slake an evil dragon's thirst for blood. The only thing he never saw himself as was a living person. This was precisely why Xie Qingcheng had willingly acquiesced to He Yu's demands. If this choice could direct He Yu's life back onto the right track and prevent him from harassing Xie Qingcheng more and stirring up any more trouble, then, seeing as things had already come to this point, he might as well let the younger man do whatever he pleased. Someone who didn't see himself as a living person wouldn't take this kind of thing too seriously. Even though it was very stressful and irritating in a physical sense, in the grand scheme of things, it was worth basically nothing. Xie Qingcheng was very frightening. He didn't need himself, and aside from Xie Shui, Chen Man, and Auntie Li, there was likely no one else in the world who needed him either. In truth, there were times when Xie Qingcheng thought that now that Xie Shui and Chen Man had grown up and could look after Auntie Li, the three of them would be able to survive without him. In other words, there was no one in the world who couldn't live without him. And so, Xie Qingcheng tore himself into countless pieces so that he could use his own flesh and bones to deal with any feral dogs or wicked dragons he encountered on the road. When he thought things through, it really was that simple. He didn't have the time to act out a cycle of proposition and rejection with He Yu every single day. Thus, in the end, he simply chose to use himself to deal with this crazy dragon, and then drag his own life back onto the right track once more. When it came to certain things, he really was heartless. It's interesting, and I mean also devastating, but it's kind of interesting to me that he's self-sacrificing in this way. Because there's clearly, there's a limit to his self-sacrificingness, and that limit was the way that he was unwilling to continue being a doctor on facing, threats of possible death because of the idea that something could happen to him that, what happened to Qin Ziyan. So, at least at that time, he wasn't self-sacrificing to this degree in this way, about that thing. But he is about other things, and I don't know if it's, something changed or if he's always had, that limit. Because the way this sounds is he just doesn't care. He just doesn't care about his life. He doesn't seem to have a limit. But there's something there. But the little beast was different. That little beast didn't think about it so much. And he had no idea that Xie Qingcheng was harboring such a terrifying state of mind when he agreed to continue that kind of relationship with him. After leaving the stage, he went to find Xie Qingcheng. At that moment, he was in a terrific mood because Xie Qingcheng had finally said yes to him. After more than 10 days, a genuine smile finally spread across his face for all to see. But who would have thought that when he stepped down from the stage and looked around, Xie Qingcheng had already left. The seats were empty. Chen Man was gone too. He Yu stood rooted to the spot as the departing crowd surged around him, his smile fading into mournful stillness. As soon as he returned to his dorm room, Yu removed Chia Ching-chung from his block list. He still disliked homosexuality, just as he disliked Xie Ching-chung. But he told himself that sex and love were two different things. Alright, I the funniest thing is the way that he's trying to separate sex and love, and he's trying to say, like, I'm not homosexual because I don't love a man. But, like, I know it's far more complex than this, but it is, we're dealing with a translation to English, but still, sex is in the word. It's homosexuality. So the sex part counts, too. Like, what are you talking about? Naturally, he could regard them separately. He felt that he could still be a straight man with a clear conscience. Therefore, this time was different from the previous time at the club. That first time at the club, he'd blocked Xie Ching-chung as soon as he left, because he had been too naive. The second time in the dressing room, he unblocked him in a hurry, because he'd suddenly found an excuse he could use to dispel his doubts. That first time, when he had blocked Xie Ching-chung immediately after doing the deed without even batting an eye, he hadn't realized the severity of the problem. But afterward, his dreams were all filled with images of him fucking Xie Ching-chung. The young man's blood had been set aflame by the experience, with no way of putting it out. It was impossible to walk back from certain things once they'd happened. After relapsing on the drug known as Xie Ching-chung in the dressing room, he was still riding the high even now, and it was a high so thrilling that even his illness seemed like it had been cured. The straight man stared down at his phone screen. It was merely a WeChat profile picture, yet his pretty almond eyes were still slightly infatuated. Xie Ching-chung, he typed. Why did you leave without saying anything? When he read it over afterward, the tone seemed a bit harsh. Usually, He Yu didn't really care about whether his tone made Xie Ching-chung uncomfortable or not, but when he thought about how good he'd felt just now, He Yu figured he couldn't leave him with too terrible an impression. Right now, he didn't want Xie Ching-chung to find him too annoying. I think He Yu, he's beyond the level of not understanding things about consent that I had even thought. Like, I kind of thought that, like, he was aware, like, he bribed Xie Ching-chung. Like, he was aware that consent was coerced. It was basically not in the picture. I thought that he kind of, like, knew that. Like, he was like, it's horrible, I'm gonna do it anyway. But he seems to... He has less self-awareness than I thought, so... That's... Henry, you just had a thought. What if He Yu's evilness is amped up by some drug, like a certain story? So that would be interesting. I don't know if I want... I don't really want Meat Bun to have done the same thing in this story. Sorry, I might be... I maybe shouldn't have even said her name there. I'm not trying to spoil anything. I just, I don't know. That's an interesting thought. That's a distinct possibility. Oh dear. Where the heck was I? I'm scared now. I'm just thinking about, I'm just thinking about that now. Oh yeah. Right now, he didn't want Xie Ching-chung to find him too annoying. It's just like, that's... Like, are you kidding me? Are you joking? So he edited his message again. Shiega, what did you think about my treatment? Is there anything that I need to work on? Not appropriate. He knew with certainty that Xie Qingcheng wouldn't respond to him. He Yu deleted his message again and pondered for a while, thinking that it was probably better to send a voice message in lieu of a text message. He and Xie Qingcheng were already in this kind of relationship now, so sending a voice message was the most appropriate course of action. It would also allow Xie Qingcheng to hear his actual tone, so he wouldn't misunderstand. After thinking for a while, He Yu began to talk. Surprisingly, his voice was quite gentle, but it still sounded a bit choppy, like the first greeting a lover gave the morning after the wedding night. By doing his utmost to feign calmness, his sudden overt solemnity ended up making him sound even more familiar. Shiega. He Yu hesitated for a long while after he pressed the voice message button, not knowing what to say. Where are you? I'll pick you up in my car. No, that was no good. He couldn't send a message like that. He hastily deleted it. The one thing that Xie Qingcheng hated the most was when others tried to look after him. He was too paternalistic, so anything along the lines of, I'll help you, I'll give you a ride, or I'll take care of you, was taboo to him. When He Yu had offered to help him get dressed in the dressing room just now, Xie Qingcheng had angrily but weakly told him to scram, even though in the end, He Yu had insisted on buttoning his shirt for him. If He Yu said he wanted to drop him off, Xie Qingcheng would be furious. He Yu mulled it over again, finally thinking things through. He had decided to continue this relationship with Xie Qingcheng, and he had just been thoroughly satisfied. Like any male who had found a mate, the little dragon was naturally feeling quite obedient, retracting his claws and hiding his fangs, his tone practically cajoling. Shiega, that... He remembered that Xie Qingcheng was especially fond of winning over others and enjoyed very competitive activities. In other words, he was extremely manly. So after thinking things over a second time, this dumb fuck straight man came up with an utterly preposterous method of winning Xie Qingcheng's favor. My family invested in a recreational property in the suburbs, and the outdoor facilities are very good. Why don't we go golfing tomorrow, or maybe... do you like horse racing? How about we go horseback riding together? He was a bit clueless when it came to homosexuality, so it hadn't occurred to him for a moment that there was no way Xie Qingcheng would be able to hit a golf ball so soon after the sex they just had. If anything, it was more likely that the ball would end up hitting him instead. He even had the gall to fucking suggest horse racing. Oh, I just thought about that. I was just sitting here giggling about, how ridiculous it is. He's trying to set up a date, and I'm like, oh, yeah, no. The worst possible activity to suggest. Men and women were completely different. But he had no idea that his ge couldn't recover that quickly. He even told himself that this would be an excellent way of winning back Xie Qingcheng's favor, suited specifically to his tastes. He really was as clueless as a man could be. He sent the message. Then he let out a sigh and immediately tossed his phone aside. In 19 years, he had never been so nervous about saying anything to anyone before. Even his palms were covered in a fine sheen of sweat. Of course, he knew that there was a chance Xie Qingcheng wouldn't reply, so once he sent the message, he made sure to lock his phone screen and place it out of reach. He figured he'd look at it again in a couple of hours. Who knew, maybe something unexpected might happen. What he hadn't anticipated was the phone vibrating right away, while he was drinking some water with an air of feigned composure. After getting such an instantaneous response, he nearly dropped the cup. Cough, cough, cough. Choking, he wiped away the water that had accidentally splashed onto his face. suppressing the anticipation in his heart. He pretended to calmly and indifferently straighten out his shirt and took out a tissue to dab away the water. Only then did he succumb to temptation, picking up the phone and unlocking the screen. What came into view was a bright red exclamation point that nearly blinded him. A message was appended below. Godfather has enabled friend verification. You are not yet one of his or her friends. Please first send a friend request. You will only be able to chat after the user accepts it. Send a friend request. He Yu stared at his phone, dumbfounded. In an instant, his expression went from exceedingly delighted to extremely pale, as if he had been thwacked on the back of his head with a golf club or kicked squarely in the chest by a horse. Xie Qingcheng had deleted him? Xie Qingcheng had actually dared to delete him? For a moment, He Yu felt like he was being suffocated, like poisonous fumes of anger were coiling around his heart. He was so furious that the world began to spin before his eyes. He Yu had merely blocked him. Merely. Their chat logs were all still there, and he could reverse his decision any time he wanted. Why was Xie Qingcheng so trigger-happy that he'd delete He Yu and all of their contact history, without leaving him the slightest bit of leeway? How could he delete him? He Yu became very impulsive when he lost his temper. He was usually calm and composed in all matters, but he had grown accustomed to being willful when it came to Xie Qingcheng. He immediately rushed out of his dormitory, jumped into his car, and floored it all the way to Moyu Alley. Despite speeding the whole way there, he found himself at a loss as to what he wanted to say, even as he was knocking on Xie Qingcheng's door. Maybe he simply ought to say nothing at all, but rather curse him out and then leave as soon as he was finished. The door opened. But the person who opened it was Chenman. A buzzing noise filled He Yu's head. His expression immediately became extremely unsightly. As things stood, Chenman was fully illuminated to He Yu's eyes, while He Yu himself remained in shadow. He Yu knew about Chenman's sexual orientation, while Chenman had no idea that He Yu had already slept with Xie Qingcheng. When Chenman saw He Yu, he was every bit as friendly as the time they'd met in the dining hall. Chenman recognized him on sight. He smiled and said, "It's you." He Yu's expression was extremely bleak, as he silently swept his gaze over Chenman. But faced with someone other than Xie Qingcheng, he still maintained his composure. "It's me. It's been so long since the last time we met, you." Chenman was halfway through launching into small talk before he finally noticed the hostility in He Yu's expression. He started in surprise, unsure of how he had managed to upset him. Is there something I can help you with?" He Yu said mildly. "I'm looking for Xie Qingcheng." "Oh." Despite his misgivings, Chenman turned around and called out for Xie Qingcheng. There was no response. "Wait a moment. He's taking a shower and probably didn't hear. I'll go tell him you're here." He Yu's expression became even stiffer, his complexion taking on a tinge of green. Chenman came back to the door a moment later with a subtle expression on his face. Previously, he had regarded He Yu with a smile, but this time, he carefully examined the face of this fellow youngster with obvious searching intent. He Yu was always courteous to others, but he didn't show any friendliness whatsoever toward Chenman, just glared at him menacingly out of the corner of his eye. "What are you looking at?" For a moment, Chenman didn't respond. "Xiege doesn't want to see you," he said. The former light-hearted gentleness in his voice had disappeared. "He said you should leave." He relayed this after some deliberation. Xie Qingcheng's specific words had been, "Tell that little beast to scram." But even so, He Yu's temper flared. "And if I don't leave?" he said in a coldly sinister voice. Chenman wasn't as shameless as he was. He immediately flushed with anger. Why are you being so unreasonable? Tell him to come out. Shiega isn't willing to see you. You can't demand that. Yu watched Chenman's face and ears turn red as he argued, an intense pressure building in his chest. He thought again of how Chenman had sneakily touched Xie Qingchung's hand in the theater, and how he'd almost kissed Xie Qingchung on the cheek. He wasn't decent or honorable at all. He was just a goddamn filthy-minded homosexual. The level of projection. He wanted to kick Chenman in the chest. After all, even if he injured or killed him with that kick, he'd probably get little more than a slap on the wrist. Right. I didn't really think about that. The level of, economic privilege that he has, and the way that strings could be pulled. Henry, the projector emoji. The thought became more and more vivid, and Yu was all but ready to put it into action. However, at that very moment, Chenman, you can head home. Chenman turned and looked back to see that Xie Qingchung had already finished showering and walked out. He was draped in a bathrobe, the collar pulled up high so that it covered the red marks below in their entirety, water dripping from his sopping wet hair as he looked at the two of them. That's the end of the chapter. How long? Okay. This is page 121, chapter 66. I couldn't hold back. Even though Chenman had reservations, he would never dare to disobey Xie Qingchung. He left. Once he was gone, Xie Qingchung walked to the doorway and stood before Yu. Yu was still dressed in the Huzhou University uniform, adorned with his badge from the award ceremony. Xie Qingchung looked him over. I really ought to congratulate you, chairman of the student government. Yu looked at him in confused silence. What more do you want to say? What did he want to say? He certainly couldn't behave like a scorned woman and demand an explanation for why Xie Qingchung had deleted him. He racked his brains for suitable excuses to no avail. When Yu didn't respond, Xie Qingchung slowly narrowed his eyes, examining him carefully. The look in his eyes made Yu feel at once annoyed and uneasy. Ever since he was young, whenever he lied to Xie Qingchung or kept anything from him, Xie Qingchung would always appraise him with this kind of gaze. He rarely received this kind of look from anyone else. This look that felt like an X-ray piercing straight through him. Yu instinctively began to feel restless. He looked searchingly from Xie Qingchung's face, to the collar of his bathrobe, to the beads of water dripping from his black hair. Chenman didn't know why Xie Qingchung had gone to take a shower the moment he got home, but Yu was well aware. And because it was all too clear to him, he felt very uncomfortable. Xie Qingchung had already said yes to him. So the two of them would have plenty more entanglements in the future. In that case, why was he in such a hurry to wash the marks he'd left from his body? Not to mention, Xie Qingchung had allowed Chenman to come home with him. And there was also the fact that Xie Qingchung was actually so relaxed and casual toward Chenman that he didn't even hesitate to take a shower when Chenman was in his house. Xie Qingchung didn't believe what Yu had told him about Chenman at all. The name Chenman suddenly became a necrotic ulcer eating away at Yu's bones, giving rise to an overwhelming torment that tarnished the color of his eyes. What about him? What was he doing here? This annoyed Xie Ching-chung. The only reason Chen Man had come back with him was because he had left some debriefing reports at Xie Ching-chung's place and was picking them up on his way home. His house was too small, so he was worried that in such close quarters, Chen Man would detect a scent that wasn't his own on his body. So he'd insisted on taking a shower straight away, even though Chen Man was there. Plus, he didn't feel the need to have his guard up against Chen Man. So why did it sound so unbearably filthy coming from He Yu's mouth? A chill emanated from Xie Ching-chung's eyes. What's your problem, He Yu? What does his coming here have to do with you? How could it have nothing to do with me? Who is he to me? And who are you to me? I don't know who he is to you, He Yu said after a moment of silence. But as for who I am to you... He Yu's expression grew extremely dark. His happiness from half an hour ago might as well have been from a previous lifetime, as the derangement that Xie Ching-chung knew all too well surfaced once again in his eyes. Now that you've washed up, has your memory been scrubbed clean too? You agreed to me yourself. You literally just agreed. Xie Ching-chung stared at He Yu, his eyes completely devoid of warmth. His gaze so piercing, it seemed like no one could possibly challenge him. After the first time he'd been with He Yu, Xie Ching-chung had been under great physical strain. However, he wasn't an invalid. Once he readjusted his attitude and stood back up, his indomitable sense of self was such that any injuries he sustained had practically no effect on him. Listen here, He Yu. I agreed to you, but that only went as far as things in bed. Outside of the bedroom, you don't matter. Right now, there's nothing between us at all. As he spoke, his collar loosened slightly, revealing the skin beneath like a thin sheet of ice, with the kiss marks He Yu had left on his body a little over an hour ago, like peach blossoms frozen beneath the surface. Gorgeous, yet utterly frigid, completely devoid of life. A water droplet fell, gliding along the curve of Xie Ching-chung's face to his jaw before sliding down the side of his neck. Unblinkingly, He Yu's eyes trailed that drop of water all the way down. It left a meandering track of wetness, all the way to his clavicle. Xie Ching-chung straightened out his bathrobe coldly, cutting off his advancing gaze. He Yu lifted his eyes again, meeting those twin pools of frozen peach blossoms. If there's nothing else, you should leave. Just because you got a taste of something new doesn't mean you should keep chasing after it forever. Xie Ching-chung's every word and sentence stabbed into him. That would make you no different from a beast. And it would make you seem... He paused. Very inexperienced. He Yu's expression turned very ugly. On the one hand, he didn't want to admit to this man that he really was that lacking in experience. He'd even lied to Xie Ching-chung before, saying that it wasn't his first time, that Xie Ching-chung wasn't the best he'd had. But on the other hand, he knew that Xie Ching-chung had already seen through his bullshit. He had been so frustrated at the club, missing the mark until sweat soaked his brow and veins stood out at his temples, and yet despite wasting so much time, he still couldn't figure out how to put it in. And Xie Ching-chung was no virgin. How could he possibly not have noticed that this youngster was just trying to repair his shattered ego? He Yu stared at Xie Ching-chung's face, which was still covered in beads of water. He said indignantly, "This time, I didn't come to find you for that." "How unusual," Xie Ching-chung replied. "Then why are you here?" But at this point, it was even more impossible for He Yu to admit that he had come to find him because of a deleted contact. That would be even more embarrassing. And so, He Yu began blabbering at random. "Because I'm sick." After a pause, He Yu continued insistently, "I'm sick, and I want you to treat me." Still no response. "Don't you remember? You used to be a doctor," Xie Ching-chung. It would have been fine if he hadn't said anything. But the moment he brought this up, Xie Qingcheng became incandescently furious. If he didn't remember that, he would have already made a clean break with He Yu and stayed as far away from him as possible. There was no way he'd still be dealing with this stupid mess. After a momentary silence, Xie Qingcheng braced a hand against the doorframe and narrowed his eyes. He'd finally lost some of his cool, revealing the exceedingly vicious face beneath the broken fragments of his ice-cold mask. I remember that very clearly. The fury he'd suppressed for too long suddenly rushed out in an instant. That's what I wanted. Honestly, I want him to vent, even if it doesn't end well. Xie Qingcheng abruptly grabbed He Yu's face, bracing his other elbow against the doorframe. He kept his voice very low, but the strength behind each word was practically enough to forcibly tear the human skin disguise from He Yu's beastly body and throw the bloody husk to the ground. But I hope you also remember that I quit that job 4 years ago. If you're sick, it doesn't have anything to do with me. As he spoke into He Yu's ear, his low, throaty voice had a searing heat to it, but each sentence was coated with splinters of ice. If you die, though, you can notify me in one of my dreams. If I'm in a good mood, I might go to your grave and light you a stick of incense. You animal. He straightened up and patted He Yu on the cheek. Now get lost. But before the sound of his voice could fade, his pupils suddenly contracted. Catching him off guard, He Yu had fiercely bitten down on his fingertips, his mouth filling with blood. Xie Qingcheng. He Yu stared fixedly at Xie Qingcheng's face, the tip of his tongue sweeping over Xie Qingcheng's fingers. Xie Qingcheng pulled his hand away with a grim expression, but He Yu unexpectedly caught his wrist in his grip. Henry, Merry Christmas, you filthy animal. He Yu glanced at the tattoo that kept on appearing in his wet dreams like some sort of curse, then licked his bloody lips before smacking them gratuitously, purely intending to disgust Xie Qingcheng. Your blood tastes sweet. Xie Qingcheng nearly slapped him, but he didn't want to attract the neighbor's attention by making a scene. He only said in a low voice, "Let go." He Yu did no such thing. Rather, he only tightened his grip. In their deadlock, he surreptitiously forced Xie Qingcheng's wrist upward. He lowered his head, but his eyes drifted up. In the dim entryway of the old house, he stared closely at Xie Qingcheng's face. It seemed as if He Yu intended to take all the burning resentment that he hadn't been able to relieve since his first time and ferociously force it into Xie Qingcheng's body. He lifted Xie Qingcheng's scholarly wrist, forcing him to reveal the tattoo along its inside, then bit down ruthlessly on the tender skin there, as though injecting him with venom. Xie Qingcheng's expression tensed. His aching hand had gone numb, but he couldn't make a sound. He could only stare fiercely back into He Yu's eyes in the darkness. Remember this, Xie Qingcheng. He Yu finally spoke, flinging Xie Qingcheng's arm aside. You are my father's old friend, my personal physician, and also someone that I've fucked. To you, I have to be special. So in the future, don't let me hear you ask, who are you to me? Ever again. Xie Qingcheng's blood seemed to have satisfied him, yet it also seemed to make him thirst for more. Neatbun is quite close to writing. She is quite close to writing an Omegaverse story, and she is also teetering on the edge of writing a vampire story. I would absolutely read that. And one more thing. Stay away from Chen Man. He Yu continued. He's a disgusting homosexual. He definitely has dirty thoughts about you. Xie Qingcheng stared fixedly at He Yu for a while, then said with incomparable disgust, He Yu, you think you have the right to say that about someone else right now? Why can't I say it? Don't you feel like a hypocrite? Just who's the homosexual here? You're really telling me it's not you? What right do you have to talk about Chen Man? Just think about it. What right do you have? You know, it's funny in this situation because it very much seems like He Yu is projecting and making things up about Chen Man, and he is. And he's also right about Chen Man being gay. And it's like, Xie Qingcheng would never think that. And even if he's like, if Chen Man hints at it or something, he's probably going to brush anything like that aside now because of the fact that He Yu has been saying it to him. He's going to be like, no, like, it can't be. It was as if He Yu had been slapped across the face. His cheek twisted. I'm sorry. I can read. I do this every week. His cheek twitched as he pursed his lips tightly, still stained with blood that had yet to dry. His face had gone extremely pale. He wanted to say to Xie Qingcheng, it's not the same at all. I didn't fuck you because I like you. It was only because it felt good. Because I don't like you. It can't be considered attraction, and therefore, I'm not gay. And what happens when you do like him, He Yu? But he had only just opened his mouth when Xie Qingcheng pushed him out the door. Get out. Get the fuck out. No, you already agreed to continue. That's right. I agreed. But now I'm tired. I need to rest. And the clock's run out on your nighttime session. Got it? Don't take yourself too seriously. What nighttime session, He Yu snapped. We're both treating each other for... We're both treating each other? What does He Yu mean, we're both treating each other for blank? Does he believe that by doing this with Xie Qingcheng, he's somehow, like, treating something within Xie Qingcheng? Oh, is it, like, is he talking about treating, like, his frigidity? Xie Qingcheng's expression turned malicious. Then today's course of treatment is over. Oh, Henry, okay, that is what okay. He said he's healing his frigidity. I forget if He Yu ever said that out loud to Xie Qingcheng, so I'm like, does he even know what he's talking about? Then today's course of treatment is over. I feel great right now. Really great. So can you leave already, you charlatan? Then he made to close the door. He was just about to slam it shut right in He Yu's face, but He Yu stubbornly wedged himself against it. Xie Qingcheng, don't push me. Xie Qingcheng shoved at the door, wordlessly but with great force, pinching He Yu's fingers against the frame and leaving red marks. The old metal door had been in disrepair for years, and there were even some barbs and splinters at its edges. Over the course of their silent confrontation, the back of He Yu's hand was pierced through and began to bleed. But he didn't seem to feel it as he looked at Xie Qingcheng. He had used up all his patience in this struggle, and right now he was already on the verge of madness. All of his coaxing and persuading had been for nothing. Xie Qingcheng had refused him and cursed him in response. So what was he supposed to do? He Yu could only take off his mask, revealing the ugly and scar-riddled face of an evil dragon beneath. His voice was abnormally, hair-raisingly gentle. Great. That's just great. That Officer Chen of yours. You really trust him, don't you? At least he's more normal than you are, said Xie Qingcheng dangerously. Suddenly, He Yu bent his arm and ruthlessly wedged open the door with his elbow. Then he reached up, pressing his still bleeding fingers to Xie Qingcheng's chest. He leaned in close to Xie Qingcheng and murmured in his ear, That's fine. If you think I'm not normal, then so be it. At any rate, I'm already used to it. I heard all your heartfelt words in that video, and I've experienced your deception firsthand. I don't care what you think of me. After all, there's never been anyone who sincerely loved me, who regarded me as an equal. His tone of voice softened even further, as though transforming into silk threads, soft yet cool, and about to wind around Xie Qingcheng's neck. I'm used to all of it. He suddenly pushed hard, shoving Xie Qingcheng into the room. Both the metal and wooden doors banged shut behind them. He Yu very magnanimously even remembered to lock the door from the inside. As he locked the door, he pinned Xie Qingcheng against it and kissed him as if venting his emotions. Xie Qingcheng really hadn't expected him to have so much strength. How long had it been since their earlier entanglement? He Yu, you can't go crazy here. Xie Shui might come home. Even Xie Shui wouldn't work as a safe word for He Yu anymore. He only paused briefly before giving Xie Qingcheng his answer. He pressed Xie Qingcheng down onto his desk, scattering half-written manuscripts all over the floor. Of all the people he could possibly mention, why would he bring up Xie Shui? He Yu's eyes turned distant and cold, as the scab over that wound on his heart ripped open and began to bleed once more. He nipped at the side of Xie Qingcheng's neck even more ferociously, as though urgently seeking some medicine that could staunch the bleeding. Indeed, over the course of He Yu's life, Xie Qingcheng was like medicine that could always quell certain things, or like an ice-cold prosthesis that could fill some void. Before, Xie Qingcheng had filled in for the care he never received. Now, he could fill in for the love that he desired. Xie Qingcheng wasn't at all like the partner he'd anticipated in the past, of course. He was male, and he wasn't gentle, nor did he treat him well. When He Yu was with him, it was like he had found someone who could only barely manage to patch up a leak. Like a false tooth, or a metal limb that replaced a lost arm, even though they weren't quite satisfactory. They could at least fill some of that dreadful emptiness. It would always be better than nothing. With those thoughts, in the darkness, He Yu said to Xie Qingcheng in a low voice, "She's busy. She won't come back. So keep me company." His voice was calm, but he sounded like a complete madman, lonely and paranoid beyond belief. His response born of despair. It was as if he had gone mad, but also as if he was begging. It was still light beyond the window, but He Yu said, "It's dark out, Xie Qingcheng. Don't chase me away. There's nowhere else for me to go." That's the end of the chapter. It's a perfect time for me to take a break. And when we come back, we'll be on chapter 67, which is simply titled, He's Gay. Now, is the he's gay about Xie Qingcheng? Is it about Chen Man? It's probably about Chen Man. This being He Yu's perspective, but I don't know. We'll see. So, I will, take a much needed break, and I'll be right back. Hello, everyone. I am back, and this is a first for me on the stream. I think I came back with a beer. I was like, I need I need this to deal. I need the beer specifically to deal with this man, Yu. Um. Oh, I'm sorry you had to go switch to mobile, Saikin. I was gonna say bye, but you didn't actually go. I know, it's, this one is not from Mike. This is from my friend Miller. I don't know. So, with that, we're going to commence, chapter 67 on page 131. He's gay. When the dragon found himself without a home, he insisted on staying with the humans. He seemed to be pleading, and he wouldn't let go of Xie Qingcheng, as if he hadn't gotten enough of this novelty back in the dressing room and wanted another taste. The dragon had marked his person, but that person had turned around and immediately washed himself clean. The dragon thumped his tail, deeply satisfied. It was only natural that he wanted to mark him again. A few hours later, Xie Qingcheng lay between the pillows and blankets, his vision blurry. Although he had already reestablished his mental barriers and chosen to accept this, physically he still couldn't take going through the motions. A few hours later? So you're telling me that they just did it again? It happened again? Okay. I'm ready to drink already. Not to mention, he was beginning to suspect that agreeing to this relationship with Yu had been the wrong choice. Instead of eliminating an obstacle that wasted his time, he'd ended up wasting even more time dealing with this damn relationship. This little beast had way too much stamina. Yu lay next to him, lazily twirling his own slightly longer black hair around his fingers. Guh, how did I do? A young man's libido was practically boundless. If He Yu saw even the slightest trace of lust on Xie Qingchung's face, it was like an electric shock shooting up from his tailbone, and his exhaustion was utterly forgotten. He seemed to have an endless supply of energy. He only wanted more and more. Henry, I don't know the meme, but you are correct. The lion does not concern himself with being safe, sane, and consensual. Unlike Xie Qingcheng, who was sleeping with him just to get rid of him. Xie Qingcheng's body was like a sedative to him, no matter how harshly Xie Qingcheng spoke, or how stubborn his attitude was. As soon as He Yu slept with him, he would settle down and become very agreeable. With his mood relaxed, the argument they'd just had didn't seem to matter to him anymore. Chen Man didn't matter either. Chen Man would never get a taste anyway. Leave him to his cravings. The way He Yu looked at Xie Qingcheng now was much gentler, a sort of naked gentleness. His usual aura of gloom was peeled away, and he seemed very pure, like a normal 19-year-old in a normal relationship. It was just a pity that Xie Qingcheng wasn't looking at him. He Yu called out to him again. Xie Qingcheng. Xie Qingcheng didn't respond. He Yu touched the corner of his lips. Did it hurt? Xie Qingcheng still ignored him. He Yu hugged his waist again, pressing kisses from his shoulder to his collarbone. Did it feel good? Xie Qingcheng finally responded. Can you piss off now? He Yu smiled. I'm exhausted, he said shamelessly. I worked so hard, but you won't even humor me? I want you to take a nap with me. He hugged Xie Qingcheng tightly, leaving no room for argument. Xie Qingcheng stared coldly at the ceiling. After a long while, he said, You're not disgusted by men at all now, huh? I am disgusted by them. Xie Qingcheng scoffed. I really don't see the difference between what you're doing and what any gay man does. He Yu's expression dimmed. He was silent for a long time. This is different, he said at last. How is it different? The boy was obstinate, as if he wanted to prove something. Well, I only do this with you. Xie Qingcheng slowly rolled his eyes until his gaze landed on He Yu's face. But it was cold, colder than the frost edging the window. It's not gay if you're only doing it with me. How fucking absurd can you be? He Yu's expression turned ugly. He seemed to know deep in his heart that he was wrong, that he was twisting logic. But still, he chose to ignore his self-reflection. I don't like other men, he said. I'm only willing to do it with you. I don't want anyone else. He insisted. Xie Qingcheng, I don't like men. Are you blind? I'm a man. You're different. You're an exception. For a moment, Xie Qingcheng fell silent. Then, with a tone that seemed to contain the shadow of a viciously cold blade, he asked, And why is that? He Yu didn't have the answer. Could it be that he had a complex about losing his virginity? But he couldn't say that, of course. He was definitely a total Casanova Yu. Instead, after a pause, he very casually said, You're attractive. Why, thank you. So if I slice up my face, we could put an end to this tedious game? He Yu wasn't expecting a response like that. Flinching, he sat up at once to stare down at him. Xie Qingcheng. But immediately after his shock, he cooled. He stared into Xie Qingcheng's eyes, recovering his usual calm. No, you wouldn't. Why wouldn't I? You value life. You always treat it with great importance. Xie Qingcheng slowly closed his peach blossom eyes, his Adam's apple bobbing. Hate to break it to you, kid, but I don't value my own life at all. Damn, he said it out loud. He-Yu's temper suddenly flared, as if something had struck him in the chest. He hissed in Xie Qingchung's ear, "If you dare, I'll lock you up, cover your face, and torture you to death." Xie Qingchung opened his eyes, gazing at He-Yu coldly. "When did you start liking my face so much? You never found me attractive before." He-Yu couldn't answer. In the end, he only snapped at Xie Qingchung. It's not like you'd go so far as to disfigure yourself just because of me. Am I really that important to you?" Xie Qingchung didn't respond. After a long while, his sneer seemed to flow over the still warm bedding like glacial runoff. "That's true. Just how important are you really, He-Yu?" There was a slight sigh in his voice. He-Yu felt inexplicably uncomfortable. He didn't like it when Xie Qingchung called him He-Yu. It occurred to him that Xie Qingchung hadn't called him Little Devil in a very long time. Not since that night. Thanks to that discomfort, He-Yu found himself entangling with Xie Qingchung once again. By the time he returned to his senses, it was already fully dark out. In the evening, Chen Man called again. He was still a bit worried about the situation between He-Yu and Xie Qingchung and wanted to ask how things were. Of course, Xie Qingchung couldn't tell Chen Man the truth. "Everything's fine," he lied. "We had a misunderstanding before, but we've resolved it. Things are okay now." I just can't believe how many times this has happened now. What? That's 3 in one day? Can Xie Qingchung catch a break? Please. I wasn't really expecting that. I was expecting the pace of, like, once in a while, just He-Yu in an absolute frenzy, and then it's, like, done for a bit, and they, you know, fight, ignore each other for a while, whatever the heck. I was not expecting this. Chen Man chatted with Xie Qingchung for a little longer. He told him that, in a couple days, he wanted to come over to Xie Qingchung's place to eat Yangzhou fried rice after work. Oh, I remember He-Yu has some kind of thing about Yangzhou fried rice. He's not gonna like that. Or maybe Xie Shui did, but, like, He-Yu was, like, it was important to him or something. He-Yu listened to their conversation with an air of indifference. After Xie Qingchung hung up, he kissed his slightly cool lips. Chen Man could only listen to the words that came out of his mouth, but he could kiss and suck on these cold lips until they were hot and damp. Xiege. Afterward, he pulled away slightly from Xie Qingchung, their breaths still somewhat irrepressibly rough. But Xie Qingchung's eyes had already turned cold. He-Yu stared into those cold eyes of his, then said, "Can you get up and make me some fried rice? And a bowl of porridge." Unfucking believable, thought Xie Qingchung. That disturbance from Chen Man had left He-Yu's eyes clouded over and hazy. Yet the words he spoke were cutesy in tone, as he tried to bargain for favorable treatment. "If you want me to leave, then I'll go once I've freeloaded a meal." Whether it was an encounter between two people of the same sex or the opposite, it was exceedingly rare for someone who'd been indulging themselves all night long to demand that the person they just screwed get up and cook for them. A normal person would go to the kitchen to wash their hands and make some soup, or they'd have the hotel's room service deliver a meal. Even an ancient ruler showing favor to a maid would at least task the eunuchs with waiting on her after everything was over. But He-Yu was uniquely shameless. And as for Xie Qingchung, at first he'd wanted to curse He-Yu out, but he was so exhausted and tired of that boy. It took energy to start an argument, and he couldn't even bring himself to muster the strength to look at him right now. Henry, you're telling me a show fried this rice. On top of that, He didn't want Yu to think that he'd screwed him so hard he'd lost all strength. He'd always considered himself a manly man, and he felt compelled to prove his strength to others. Thus, in an effort to make Yu clear off as quickly as possible, Xie Qingcheng silently rose to his feet and went to make the food, his expression so blank that it seemed as though nothing had happened. His waist was very sore, and there were other parts of him that were also unspeakably uncomfortable, but he internalized the discomfort. The only thing Yu could discern from his face was a profound impassivity. It was like ruins thoroughly plundered by an unsuccessful grave robber who dug and dug deep into the ground, but failed to find any worthwhile treasures. Yu got dressed, stood up, and went to the kitchen to watch Xie Qingcheng. For some reason, his heart went from calm to restless, from restless to disappointed, and then from disappointed to bewildered. Leaning against the doorframe with a grim expression, he kept nagging Xie Qingcheng, perhaps trying to relieve the moodiness in his heart. Xie Qingcheng, don't use so much sesame oil. Xie Qingcheng, cut the green onions more finely. Xie Qingcheng, don't put the salt in so soon. Of course, he received no response to any of this guidance. Yu was deliberately nitpicking, even though he didn't actually know how to cook. He thought that if he showed off his non-existent skills before this expert by giving him such nonsensical directions, Xie Qingcheng would turn around and scold him loudly, like he had before. But he didn't. It's pay attention to me all over again. Instead, Xie Qingcheng simply did whatever he said with a bland expression on his face, spurning him utterly, silently enduring his presence, and unfeelingly dismissing him. This silence made Yu even more distraught. At least in the past, Xie Qingcheng had been willing to bicker with him. In the end, he walked over and hugged Xie Qingcheng around the waist, without warning. He turned his head to kiss Xie Qingcheng on the neck, then placed his hand on his wrist, forcing him to let go of the porridge ladle. Xie Qingcheng ignored him at first, his peach blossom eyes watching the blue flames dancing over the gas stove. But finally, probably because he was irritated with Yu's clinginess, he spat out coldly without looking back. Do you actually want food, or are you in heat? But the colder he was, the more enticing Yu found him. It was as if even the smell of disinfectant had become a concentrated pheromone. Honestly, Yu didn't like behaving so licentiously either. He had always conducted himself immaculately in front of others. Or rather, to be precise, before bedding Xie Qingcheng, he had always been very gentlemanly, even behind the scenes, and had never touched any girls. Xie Qingcheng was like an elder leading him deeper into the Garden of Eden. Regardless of how things had begun, the end result was that Xie Qingcheng had been the one to let him in. Now that he'd entered, the boy suddenly grasped a new understanding, sparking the primitive desire etched into his bones. After that, he wanted to remain forever in this forbidden land full of animalistic desire, to keep entangling with the man who had taken him in that first time, savoring the thrill that to him still held a certain degree of novelty. Lowering his eyes, Yu kissed the back of Xie Qingcheng's neck. Let the porridge simmer for a bit. Between the chilly autumn day and the burning stove, it was much hotter inside than outside. The old-fashioned window had fogged over with a thin layer of white haze, ensuring that nothing could be seen from either side. But suddenly, a hand slapped against the window pane, paler than ice and snow, and with slender and elegant bones. It seemed to spasm slightly where it strained against the glass. If one looked closer, that hand could be seen to tremble, again and again. Then, a younger-looking hand clasped the first hand, intertwining their fingers tightly. This time, One didn't even have to look that closely to see the violent shaking of the window. It seemed to be on the verge of shattering. It was at this very moment that a muffled noise came from inside. The two hands moved away from the window, leaving behind a clear mark. Before the steam could mist it over again, one could vaguely make out through that handprint how the man leaning over the counter had been flipped over to lie face up. One might even be able to glimpse the messiness of his black hair and the straight lines of his broad shoulder blades. Look up even further, and for a moment, the passionate, heated face of a young man standing before the kitchen counter would be visible. When it devoured the human offering on the stone bed, did the lonely dragon have such a fervent and besotted look on its face, too? The answer went unspoken, just as the cold wind and fog that heralded the approach of winter quickly misted over the clear mark on the window. Through the dense condensation, it was impossible to see what was happening inside, and both men kept their voices low and muffled, making sure no one could hear anything they said. First off, I have art to show you. Yeah, I saw it, and I was like, I turned the page and I saw the art, and I was like, this is the 4th time today. Are you joking? Surprisingly tasteful. It had to match the description of, like, seeing it through the window in the fog. And the description was very, poetic, you could say, but it also made me concerned that it could be indicating that someone is watching them. Even if no one is watching them at this exact moment. There's something about it that I'm like, are they being watched? Are they being followed? Like, what's going on in the big conspiracy thing happening? In the end, only the soft sound of a choked moan escaped from a small crack in the window, its timbre changing slightly as it melted into the wind. Through the blurred window, black shadows swayed, a head of black hair, a pale back like white jade, and an ill-fated, entangled relationship, as one figure seemed to pick up the other. The wicked dragon lowered its head and kissed the human shoulder with its scarred snout. It was too hot inside, the aftermath of passion melting into a hot spring, soaking into the pair of sweat-soaked men. Don't cook for Chenmon anymore. Yu was still panting slightly, as wild as a beast, a little willful, and a little on edge. I don't like him. He's a disgusting homo. Somehow, he still had the face to say that. He was still immersed in that gentle softness, yet he had the nerve to disparage someone else for being gay. Why is his snout scarred? Xia Qingcheng pushed him away as soon as the deed was done, cooling down with astonishing speed. His chest still heaved slightly, but the eyes that peered out from under his damp fringe were already cold, so frosty that it could strike a chill into the hearts of others. Finally, he lifted the corners of his lips. Back up 10,000 steps, Yu, he said with near-perfect composure. Even if he's gay, he's still better than you. Even if he's gay, he's never shown such relentless interest in me as you. He paused before continuing, his voice piercingly mocking. Every single word was calm, but they cut through Yu like a knife. You really are a card-carrying heterosexual. Not the 3,799 steps. It's not safe for me to drink at any time. So that's the end of the chapter, where that chapter was called He's Gay, We are now on page 141 for chapter 68, which is called I'm Not Gay. You keep saying that. The card-carrying heterosexual forgot to remove himself from Xie Qingchung's block list. He'd seen Xie Qingchung several more times since then. But whenever he did, all he wanted was to cling to him and hug him some more. Then he'd suddenly remember after getting home. I forgot to add him on WeChat again. To tell the truth, He Yu could have easily used black market technology to add himself back to his contacts. But he felt that the meaning behind getting Xie Qingchung to add him again would be lost if he did. And Xie Qingchung's current attitude toward him was making him feel a bit uncomfortable too. He almost never scolded him anymore. He treated sleeping with He Yu in a strictly business-like manner, as if he was going to work or dealing with a client, and then ignored him. In other words, he very rarely paid him any attention. At first, He Yu was obsessed with sex, but as time passed, this discomfort and frustration gradually began to take over. He didn't know where the old Xie Qingchung had gone, but he wanted to dig out a sliver of that old version, the person who had taken care of him and scolded him, even if it was a just lie. It was a just lie. I'm not sure if that's supposed to say even if it was just a lie, or if it's a just lie. Kind of weird. Okay. Even if it was a just lie, that poison would nevertheless quench his thirst. I think that should be just a lie. I don't think... yeah. But Xie Qingchung didn't do any of that. Xie Qingchung didn't deceive He Yu anymore, but he didn't give a damn about He Yu anymore either. And so, over time, both the young man's heart and his lust went unsatisfied. Although it seemed like he had a man who treated him with sincerity, it also felt like he had nothing at all. Their muddled relationship dragged on for a while, just like that. At the end of the school year, Professor Xie was reinstated. Winter had arrived, and more than 2 months had passed since the broadcasting tower incident. As the Qin-to-Yan dispute slowly faded, the school quietly invited Xie Qingchung back to his lectern. One night, after his self-study period, He Yu slung his book bag over his shoulder and rode his new bicycle through the light snow from one campus to the other, stopping at the door of the medical school's faculty dorm. This was the first time that He Yu had gone looking for Xie Qingchung since his reinstatement. Being reinstated was a good thing, so He Yu thought Xie Qingchung's mood ought to be a little better. He ran up the stairs 2 at a time, his breath puffing out in warm clouds, as he twirled his keys around his fingers. Xie Qingchung, he called out. Xie Qingchung wasn't there, but a female teacher happened to be coming down the stairs. You're looking for Professor Xie? She looked He Yu up and down as he stood in front of Xie Qingchung's door, mistaking him for a Shueba from their school, seeking guidance from an honorable teacher, reverent and eager to learn. You should check the library, she said. This lousy dorm's heating system isn't very good in the winter, so he might be prepping for class there instead. So off He Yu went. It was only early winter, but outside, snow had already begun to drift down from the lead-gray skies. Winter in Jiangnan was going to be exceptionally long and cold this year. There were a lot of people in the study area. He Yu kept looking until he reached a remote corner of the 3rd floor next to the window, where he caught a glimpse of Professor Xie's elegant profile. Xie Qingchung had lost a bit of weight recently, perhaps because he was getting older and didn't exercise much, and he was always exhausting himself staying up to do endless amounts of research. It was very strange. Why did he always have so many papers to draft, revise, and organize? Xie Qingchung's health was getting worse and worse. As He Yu drew closer, he could see that Xie Qingchung kept coughing lightly the entire time. There was a thermos bottle on the table, and after a particularly hard bout of coughing, Xie Qingchung went to pour himself a cup of warm water. When he tipped the thermos, though, He found that there was no more water left. He didn't feel like getting up, so he unhappily capped the bottle again, picked up his pen, and started writing something in his notebook. The tip of the pen scratched across the paper, only to pause a moment later, as a disposable cup of hot water was placed before him. He raised his head to meet Hoyu's almond eyes. The boy had fetched some water for him from the library's water dispenser. Then he pulled a chair over and sat down in front of him. Xie Chingchung's expression was cold. He immediately began to organize his books and laptop to leave, but Hoyu put a hand down on his laptop. "Where are you going?" Hoyu asked. "There's nowhere else to sit." Xie Chingchung's first thought had been to return to his dormitory, but now that he considered it, the library would probably be safer. This lunatic would be much less likely to go wild in here. Wouldn't he be walking into a trap of his own making if he went back? With a dark expression, he sat back down. Today, Hoyu was wearing a white cashmere winter coat and carrying a canvas messenger bag. His sharp jawline and thin, slightly roguish lips were hidden behind a warm, thick scarf that only revealed his puppy-like almond eyes. He seemed no different from any other cultured, knowledgeable Shueba at Huzhou Medical School, and his wide forehead, dark eyes, and straight, high nose made him appear even more likable. He looked very gentle. But Xie Chingchung knew it was a complete and total facade. This young man had an illness that had rotted down into his bones and couldn't be excised. He'd even ended up unleashing his madness onto Xie Chingchung's body. "Xie Chingchung, I've been meaning to ask you since last time." Hoyu sat calmly, playing with his pen, completely unaware of Xie Chingchung's distaste. "Why are you wearing glasses?" "Obviously, it's because I've gone blind from all the disgusting things I've had to look at lately." Whoa. Xie Chingchung gets some good lines. Hoyu was unconcerned. Smiling, he asked, "How nearsighted are you?" Xie Chingchung ignored him, lowering his head to write his notes. But unexpectedly, the young man reached over with one hand, took off the glasses that were sitting on his nose, and held the lenses before his own eyes. "Wow, that's making me really dizzy. Why are these so strong? Your eyesight used to be pretty good." Xie Chingchung snatched his glasses away and jammed them back onto his face. "What does that have to do with you?" But Hoyu knew Xie Chingchung wasn't one to hold back when it came to using his eyes. Every day he had to read thick books filled with difficult content, written in microscopic text, the kind of thing ordinary people couldn't read more than 3 lines of before they'd find themselves drifting off into blissful slumber. Hoyu couldn't understand why someone of Xie Chingchung's academic standing, someone who had been so exceptional at such a young age, still did so much research. It was like he was racing against time. Others might have assumed that Xie Chingchung was simply born with a passionate interest in medicine, that he was the kind of person who'd die if he went a single day without doing medical research. However, Hoyu knew that originally, Xie Chingchung's dream hadn't been to become an excellent doctor. There was no reason for him to be so obsessed with medicine. Then, could it be... Okay. Either he actually pours an intense amount of energy into somehow, like, trying to find the cure for psychological Ebola, or there is some other thing that he's researching that has to do with someone close to him, so I feel like it really only could be, like, Xie Shui or somebody, right? Like, there has to be some other thing that he's, like, trying to find out more about or trying to find the cure of. My assumption is that it's psychological Ebola, though. There was no reason for him to be so obsessed with medicine. Then, could it be, do you really like teaching? Xie Chingchung didn't even lift his head. "I like money." He was looking at a list of formulas. He probably thought that the formulas were much nicer to look at than Yu. So he likely didn't intend to pay any attention to Yu from this point on. Silence was mandatory in the library, so Yu couldn't talk to Xie Qingcheng for long without the medical students studying nearby complaining. He stopped talking, took out a copy of Save the Cat from his bag, and idly flipped through it. He was beginning to wonder why he, a proper student at Huzhou University's Faculty of Fine Arts, was wasting time at Huzhou Medical School's austere library. He looked up, and off to the side, caught a glimpse of Xie Qingcheng's phone. Yu picked up the phone, watching Xie Qingcheng the entire time to see if he'd react. But Xie Qingcheng was completely engrossed in writing his lessons, and didn't even notice that Yu had seized his cell phone. Yu found himself wondering, if I kissed him now, would he even notice? As that thought crossed his mind, his heart stirred slightly, but they were surrounded by students, and he wasn't so overtly insane that he'd do anything in public. He extinguished that little flame. He unlocked Xie Qingcheng's phone. This time, he remembered to add himself back on WeChat. Thought he had decided he wasn't going to do that. The password was very simple. All he had to do was enter 12345. Once the screen was unlocked, Yu went into the WeChat app on his phone and scanned his QR code with Xie Qingcheng's phone to add himself again. When he'd finished, he saw that Xie Qingcheng still hadn't noticed and felt slightly disappointed. He really wanted to make Xie Qingcheng lose his temper with him. That angry version of Xie Qingcheng wouldn't be as maddeningly elusive as the one sitting in front of him. After thinking for a bit, he changed his nickname in Xie Qingcheng's phone. World's most handsome and experienced lover. Save. After exiting the menu and taking another look, he realized that he wasn't the first in the address book. He even came after Chen Man. He thought it over some more, and then edited his nickname again. World's most handsome and experienced lover. Seeing himself at the top of the A's, he felt deeply satisfied. With that done, he took his own phone and sent Xie Qingcheng a sticker he'd made when he was bored. The sticker sure was something else. He'd taken the photo he snapped of Xie Qingcheng's sleeping face in the club and photoshopped it into a selfie of himself with his head against a pillow. He felt that these two pictures looked very good together. It was quite a harmonious composition. He'd even added a floating transparent jellyfish as a special effect and a crass "good morning" as text. Okay, can someone recreate this, like, right now? Can someone, does this exist somewhere? Can we be, like, sending this to each other on Discord? Ding. The sound of the message notification caught Xie Qingcheng's attention. When he noticed Yu had his phone, he snatched it back with a scowl. What are you doing? Yu didn't say anything. Just looked at Xie Qingcheng from the corner of his eye as he snatched his phone out of Yu's hand. With a sense of great satisfaction, he watched Xie Qingcheng's face go from white to green when he saw his new nickname and the sticker. Although Xie Qingcheng had seen this photo before, he was still shocked to see such an idiotic image photoshopped into a sticker and paired with such a stupid nickname. Yu. His tone was murderous. Yu was delighted. Professor, please be mindful of where we are. Focus on your reading. I'll keep quiet and play with my phone. Then, under Xie Qingcheng's sharp glare, he calmly picked up his phone, turned it sideways, and started fighting zombies. Xie Qingcheng's face was ashen as he deleted the fucking idiotic sticker. With that taken care of, he swiftly rose to his feet and began gathering his books to leave. Yu extended a long leg beneath the table and nudged him lightly. Where are you going? Sit down. Xie Qingcheng just ignored him. Yu's next words were even softer. Or would you rather go home? Xie Ching-chung looked like he was on the verge of exploding, but in the end, he weighed the consequences, gritted his teeth, and sat back down. However, he wasn't in the mood to read anymore, so he closed his laptop heavily and turned to look out the window. The first flakes of snow were floating down like wisps of cotton, a beautiful sight. But like He Yu, their beauty hid their bone-chilling nature. Meanwhile, He Yu kept playing his game. After beating 2 rounds, he was about to chatter away at Xie Ching-chung some more when 2 female medical school students hesitantly approached their table. However, they hadn't come to ask the professor a question, but rather, "Excuse me, are you He Yu?" "What is it?" On meeting his gaze, the 2 girls turned red like boiled shrimps. We saw the Many Faces of Malady campus film, and we think you're very handsome, so we wanted to ask you if we could get your autograph. Can you sign my notebook? I was hoping you could sign my backpack." He Yu paused for a moment before finally looking over at Xie Ching-chung with a smile. "Professor Xie, could you lend me a pen?" I have a pen, one of the girls exclaimed hurriedly. "I have one too. Do you want a ballpoint pen or a gel pen?" But He Yu merely narrowed his eyes at Xie Ching-chung, a smile unfolding on his thin lips, which made him seem at once self-satisfied and gentle. "I want a fountain pen." Very few people carried a fountain pen around these days, but Xie Ching-chung had one right by his hand. The 2 girls weren't Xie Ching-chung's students, but because he was well known throughout the medical school, they recognized him. They spoke up hesitantly. "Professor Xie, could we borrow your pen?" The more daring of the 2 girls finished her friend's sentence. Xie Ching-chung met He Yu's eyes in silence. He'd been about to say no, but on realizing that this would only require him to waste even more words on He Yu, he finally said in an indifferent tone, "Sure, go ahead." Thank you. The overjoyed girls took the distinguished professor's pen and deferentially handed it to He Yu. Seeing the way all the life seemed to drain out of Xie Ching-chung again, He Yu's smile faded. He wanted to deliberately provoke Xie Ching-chung, so after taking the pen, he handed it back with a shadowy look in his eyes. "Professor Xie, could you dip the ink for me? Get a good amount. Make sure it's not too dry." Xie Ching-chung didn't react right away. He Yu thought he would definitely refuse this time. But to his surprise, Xie Ching-chung just shot him a cold glance, then expressionlessly unscrewed the ink bottle, dipped the pen into the blue ink, and tossed it to He Yu. "Take it." I don't want He Yu to keep pushing in this moment, because I will get secondhand embarrassment of like him doing something like this in front of other people. I can't handle things like that. His attitude was indifferent and uncaring. He Yu's heart felt even stuffier. The boy didn't have even a hint of a smile on his face anymore. He took the pen, his finger grazing past Xie Ching-chung's. "Thank you." Once they had received He Yu's signature, the girls clutched them to their chests like they'd obtained priceless treasures. The 2 friends exchanged an excited look before mustering up their courage again. Then can we add your WeChat? Although Xie Ching-chung wasn't paying them any attention, he wasn't deaf, so he still heard every word of their conversation. He assumed that, given He Yu's excessively polite facade, he would certainly agree to the girl's small request. But rather than nodding, He Yu politely rejected them instead. The girls were a little disappointed, but they cheered up when they looked down at the autographs they held in their arms. The 2 of them thanked He Yu and left in high spirits. Xie Ching-chung didn't even look up as he worked on his paper. "Why did you reject them?" At the simple question, He Yu perked up like a reanimated little dragon, his invisible tail wagging to and fro. "Ah, and why would I agree? You take pleasure in those kinds of things." "You only look at the surface." He Yu paused, then added, "I only add people who spark joy." "Then delete me too," Xie Ching-chung said mildly. He Yu stared at him for a while. Then he unlocked his phone, opened the messaging app, and, under Xie Ching-chung's unwavering stare, he boldly pinned Xie Ching-chung to the top. Xie Qingcheng stared at him. I know I'm like Marie Kondo reference. I don't know when this was originally written, actually. I would be curious to find out. Where the heck was I? Xie Qingcheng stared at him. Actually, it was quite necessary for He Yu to pin Xie Qingcheng to the top, because he liked to go and find him when he had nothing better to do. Of course, since Xie Qingcheng basically ignored him, there wasn't much the two of them could talk about. But no matter how dissatisfied and unhappy that made He Yu, whenever they met, they'd just do the deed to solve the problem. It was just a pity that Xie Qingcheng was apathetic to sex. He Yu, I'm gonna give you a hint. He doesn't want it right now. I know maybe this is obviously extremely obvious, but it's like, if he actually wanted to do it, then he wouldn't be apathetic anymore. But you just have to get to that point. And I do not know how they're ever going to get to that point. Xie Qingcheng didn't need He Yu to solve any problems for him. He simply went through the motions and allowed the young man to practice on him. Although He Yu didn't receive many responses from Xie Qingcheng outside the bedroom, there were plenty of ways he could force Xie Qingcheng to acknowledge him in bed. With his nimble Shueba mind, he used every trick he could find. And as a young man, he had so much stamina that Xie Qingcheng sometimes feared that he was going to be fucked to death. Xie Qingcheng had never experienced such debauchery. He knew it was inevitable for a teenager who had just had his first taste of sex like He Yu to be voracious for more. However, given his own low sex drive, he really couldn't empathize. Eventually, Xie Qingcheng couldn't hold back his curiosity any longer. He looked it up. He checked some discussion forums online, searching for what was considered normal for boys nowadays. In other words, to figure out when he would be able to do his own work in peace. But what he ultimately saw nearly gave him a mental breakdown. Boys around 20, 3 to 5 times a week. For those with high libidos, 8 times in 10 days isn't too much either. If we don't go wild now, when are we supposed to? My girlfriend and I think even just once a day is too little. Even an exceedingly moderate old doctor of Chinese medicine replied pensively, if a relationship has already been established, then it is essential for a 20-year-old boy to do it twice a week. Xie Qingcheng hadn't been deliberately avoiding He Yu at first, but after this research, he began to hide from him in earnest. He was busy at work and blunt in his efforts to avoid He Yu, so He Yu would sometimes go 5 or 6 days without getting the chance to meet with him alone. Now, on top of always being denied psychological comfort, physical satisfaction eluded the youth as well. Consequently, every time he managed to get Xie Qingcheng in his clutches, He Yu lashed out in retaliation, tormenting him over and over again, as if the two of them didn't need to do anything other than this. He didn't consider the deed to be done until Xie Qingcheng passed out from exhaustion. After he pinned Xie Qingcheng to the top of his contacts in the library, He Yu's hunger seemed to intensify. Sometimes, Xie Qingcheng would even receive voice messages from him in the middle of the night. Sometimes He Yu talked, but other times, he did not. Usually, on the occasions when he didn't talk, all that could be heard on the line was the sound of low, muffled panting. Doctor, do you think I'm sick? Silence. I feel so uncomfortable. Still silence. Dr. Xie, can you take a look at me? That night, Xie Qingcheng hadn't gone to bed yet. He was still in the middle of organizing his files. He Yu was annoying him, so he said, being gay isn't a sickness as long as you don't come looking for me. The breathing on the other end of the phone cooled down. Then, after a long silence, He Yu said, Xie Chung. I'm not gay. I only want you. Right. Gays don't act like you do. Turn on your camera and let me see you, said Yu. Are you aware that it's 2 in the morning Beijing time right now? The person on the other end fell momentarily silent. Are you aware that at 2 in the morning Beijing time, he replied in a low yet fiery voice, I can't fall asleep because I keep thinking about how much I want to fuck you? There was no reply. Xie Chung, can I come to your dorm? I'm being blue-balled to death over here. Remembering the messages he saw on the internet, Xie Chung looked at the date on his phone. A normal 20-year-old boy with a sexual partner would usually need to do it at least twice a week. Yu didn't even get close to that amount. It had already been nearly 10 days since Yu had last gotten a chance to be alone with him. The boy was so pent up he was about to lose it. Great, bring it on. It would be great if Yu lost his mind. That would fix all of Xie Chung's problems. I don't know, I think you have problems because he's losing his mind. Henry, I get it, though. I get it. It's, I don't know. It's the meat bun magic. If that's the case, my recommendation is that you'd be better off finding yourself a girlfriend, Xie Chung said. Or perhaps a boyfriend. Don't. Before he could finish speaking, a box popped up on his screen. The image was very blurry and dark. It was the male student dorm at Huzhou University. The curtains were drawn around a single bed. At first, Xie Chung didn't recognize the shape that appeared on his screen. He took a closer look and immediately felt as though the hand holding his phone had been stung. The image wobbled as the camera panned upward, and Yu's eyes appeared. They were misted over, searingly hot, but with an undeniable gloom about them. Despite his initial shock, Xie Chung had a lot of experience keeping calm. After a moment of silence, he said, I hope that you use your black market technology for something of greater value than this. A single minute of a spring night is worth 1,000 gold, said Yu. Don't you think that's something of value? Xie Chung sighed and wearily lifted his hand to rub his forehead. Spring my ass. As he spoke, he set his phone face down on top of the thick medical files, stood up, and walked into the bathroom, leaving Yu to his own devices. He didn't realize that cursing Yu out while they were outside the bedroom, with that slight edge of anger and hint of a long-absent human emotion, had finally allowed Yu's heart a modicum of relief. Silver dust fell from the vast sky like so much fragmented jade, and with this kind of intimate back-and-forth tussling, the year drew to a close. The last day of the semester arrived. The first years were still busy taking their final exams as, one by one, the fourth years packed their suitcases and towed them home. Among the cars that had come to pick up the children, there was a military-style Jeep that was particularly eye-catching. The car was majestic, the brand was preeminent, and most importantly, the officer leaning against the car was unbelievably handsome. Dressed in uniform with boots and a pair of sunglasses, this officer was a highly ranked colonel. Beneath his towering nose was a pair of thin, narrow lips curved in a smile, as refreshing as a mountain spring. Strong-willed and dashing. Fuck. Passengers stopped to look back. So handsome. Whose car is that? Whose relative is he? That's the end of the chapter. I don't know who this is. Okay, that's where we're ending today. We'll pick up back on Wednesday. And on Wednesday, when we return, we will be on chapter 69. Nice. Which is called I Asked Him Out to a Movie. He's like, Hoyu is like, we're just gonna go on dates now. That is what we're gonna do. Forcing someone into a relationship with you. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what happened today. We didn't get any more of like the conspiracy lurking underneath the surface. I'm kind of expecting that to come up again soon because things have been silent for a while and that concerns me. Yeah, the chapter after I'm not gay is I asked him out to a movie. Be so for real. Exactly. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah. So, thank y'all. Thank y'all for being here. And I'm gonna go and I will see you on Wednesday.